Thank you all for being here, and let's begin with Heather Stratman.
Good afternoon. It's nice to be here. Again, my name is Heather Stratman. I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Executive Officer for the Association of California Cities Orange County. To give you folks a flavor of what we do, who we serve, and our purpose, the association serves the 34 cities of Orange County on regional public policy issues. So anything that you can think of that transcends all of our 34 cities, that being housing, transportation, homelessness, and a variety of other public policy issues, we dive into that on behalf of the 34 cities. We do this through three basic pillars, the first being education that empowers. We believe strongly in the idea that we have to provide our elected officials with empowering education that allows them to make the best decisions for their individual communities. So we do not try to help them decide what's best at the dais, but rather give them education that allows them to reach good policy decisions. The second piece of that is policy that is collaborative. We really believe here in Orange County, with 34 cities that are all contiguous to one another in this large urban area that we reside in, that there needs to be a strong sense of collaboration among those cities so that they can deal with their challenges and their opportunities in the most cost-effective and utilizing the best resources that they can. And oftentimes that is when they can work together. So we focus heavily on collaboration. We don't stop with sort of this contiguous nature of cities. We also encourage them to work with the private sector, with our nonprofit communities, with the County of Orange, and elsewhere. So we become this interesting 8-lane intersection of policy collaboration, widespread throughout this county, and even sometimes statewide. And then the last piece of our work really evolves around advocacy. So if you think about cities oftentimes are sort of the last step in the intergovernmental relations world between federal and state entities, right? So our federal government is pushing policies and priorities down to our cities, and the state government is doing the same. And oftentimes our cities have to react to that, sometimes with very limited resources and tools to do so. And so part of my job is to find opportunities to create flexibility in how our cities respond to the challenges and the limited resources that they have. So I want to give you that context because everything that we do is in the spirit and in the essence of helping our cities sort of drive solutions for their communities, and recognizing that the values and the character of the 34 cities of Orange County are quite unique and different. Newport is very different than Placentia, and Placentia is very different than, let's say, Los Alamitos. So we respect those values and those character differences, but at the same time, this is one county, and we think of it in terms of a sort of a regional nature. So, talking specifically about homelessness, I have been in my position since early 2016, and to be quite honest, I spent most of my career in the water world, right? So I step into this position, and it's if you think about it, I worked on infrastructure and pipelines and building water recycling facilities all across the state of California. Fascinating work, very important, we all need water. I step into this role and it's like, okay, wow, we're dealing with major social issues. And at that point in time, I would say of our 34 cities, those cities that were deeply engaged in homelessness were very limited. To give you a sense, we have 178 local elected city council members in this county. And at that time, I had about 4 cities who even cared, wanted to show up, or were deeply engaged in the issue. And that was because it was at their front door. Santa Ana, Anaheim, Orange, and Costa Mesa. Those were really the cities that were feeling the brunt of it, were expending tremendous amount of financial resources against it, and they wanted to both understand opportunities for solutions better, but also start to work together. So we created a homelessness task force. And at that point in time, it was very much in the spirit of, okay, what are our best practices? What's working in other communities? How can we start to talk to one another? And so we were doing that, and I was sensing a level of impatience from those cities, which is, Heather, drive solutions, we're tired of talking about it. but the rest of the county wasn't really engaged in even the conversation at that point. So we spent a tremendous amount of time just trying to start an educational sort of series to get our cities engaged in, okay, what's really going on in the rest of the county? Why is our homelessness population surging? What can we do about it? And is it even my problem if I live in South County and this is really a Santa Ana problem? Yes, it is, and it's coming to a neighborhood near you. That's what I used to say. And so we spent about a year kind of going through that process, and I would say that it was a learning lesson for me because there was certainly some resistance. I feel that resistance today to some extent. But we started to make progress, and more we recognized that people in our cities were looking for solutions because the community was starting to ask for solutions. And I think that's an important part of the story, particularly as we sit here today. The community started to ask for solutions. And our partners all across the region were saying, we have ideas, we have ways that we can really engage and come up with solutions. So this regional sort of perspective began to take shape. And at the same time, I was deeply engaged in the UCI cost study, the cost study on homelessness that was funded both by United Way and Jamboree Housing. And we were going through a lot of data that was being driven through some remarkable professors at UCI. If you haven't had a chance to read the cost study or you're unfamiliar with it, we can direct you to a website that you can find it because it had some pretty interesting and startling information. And my portion of that exercise was really to gather the data from the cities. How much are you spending? Where are those resources going? Let's make a business case in terms of how do we get people's attention and sort of rise awareness to this issue. And so through that process, if we have 34 cities, 17 of those cities responded to the survey. And in the fiscal year 2014-2015, so that would be July 1st of 2014 through June 30th of the following year, 13 of the 34 cities spent $120 million alone on homelessness services. So that is just a fraction of the cost of what this county was spending. Overall, on very conservative numbers, we spent $299 million in that fiscal year as a county overall. That includes the County of Orange, the 13 cities that reported in, as well as our hospitals, our nonprofit service providers. And I would say those are very, very conservative estimates about what we were really spending. And so I started to take that data and those numbers, and I sort of went on a roadshow to our cities, and I said to them, for those of you in this issue who does not, this issue does not pull at your heartstrings, this big price tag should start to get your attention, because our numbers are increasing rapidly, and we're spending a tremendous amount of money, and we're not really making any progressive sort of direction in terms of solutions. So just to give you a sense, what did we find when we started to collect that data? 68% of our homeless are here from Orange County. I think there's a lot of anecdotal stories that folks from Kansas are being shipped in on busloads. It simply isn't the case. Our study numbers told us that 68% of the individuals that are homeless on our streets today have been in Orange County for over 10 years. So they've been here for a decade. They are our residents. They are our people. And I think that's a really important sort of a sense of understanding that we all need to have. There are factors that are bringing other individuals into this area, everything from sober living homes to our, to opioid addiction and otherwise. But to be honest, most of these individuals are here. And when we ask why are you out on the streets, the number one leading cause was, we lost a job. I lost a job. And there are other factors that go into that, everything from mental illness, certainly that being a major factor, that coupled with substance abuse, domestic violence, and it really runs the gamut from there. But actually understanding where people come from and why they're homeless is an important factor in actually being able to sort of engage in the issue from a positive standpoint and get a better understanding than how we can help and drive solutions. So while I was going through this process, and I had some anxious cities who were very much pushing me for, okay, let's stop talking about it, we understand the data, we understand the numbers, but Heather, let's start to drive solutions. So I talked about briefly, we handle a tremendous amount of advocacy on behalf of our cities. Our cities, and this is a little bit wonky and in the weeds and policy, so forgive me, but bear with me for a second. Our cities in 2013 lost redevelopment agencies. Governor Brown dissolved our redevelopment agencies so that the state was not backfilling the funding that had to go to our public school systems. And in doing so, our cities lost a tremendous amount of funding and availability for flexibility in terms of how they could fund housing and redevelopment projects within their communities. So we stood back from that a little bit and said, okay, if funding and flexibility is an issue, let's go back let's take a look at that, analyze that, and come up with tools and solutions that give cities maybe a little bit of flexibility back. So we introduced a piece of legislation that would allow our cities to do so, and also allow our cities to pool their funding, contiguous cities to pool their funding to fund emergency shelters, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. We knew that they needed more financial resources. The governor signed that piece of legislation, and it was effective January 1st of this year. It was one very small step in our efforts to start to identify real solutions. So we kind of got through that. We were writing some success, but we turned to our partners, and I see faces in the audience that are our partners, Families Forward, Jamboree Housing, and we said, okay, we have the cost study, we've done some legislative advocacy, but where do we go from here? The system seems to be broken, and we don't seem to have solutions to actually drive long-term results. So, working with our business community partners, we came up with a plan to basically double the amount of permanent supportive housing in this county. So what is permanent supportive housing? I'm going to give you the quick definition. It's a nationally recognized, proven, and cost-effective solution to the needs of vulnerable people with disabilities who are homeless, institutionalized, or at greatest risk for these conditions. So you're really thinking about individuals with severe mental illness, severe chronic health conditions, and most oftentimes a combination thereof. And in some cases, these are individuals who simply cannot or will not be able to take care of themselves ever, but that certainly is not always the case. Oftentimes, you have individuals who do have these persistent, both mental and physical health conditions, that once they're stabilized and they're actually put into a proper home, they can be much more self-sufficient. In some cases, they can actually hold a job. It really is individualized, and I think that's an important point to underscore. It is very individualized per the person. So why did we want to double the number of permanent supportive units in this county? Today we sit on about 2,600 units of permanent supportive housing in this county, and every single one of those is full, completely maxed out. We have a huge waiting list. So doubling those units we knew would create flow in the system. What is the system? I'll use myself as an example. If I were to enter the system tomorrow, I would hopefully be placed in a women's shelter. I have a child, maybe that child, my child comes with me. I go through an assessment period. Perhaps I'm diagnosed with both a substance abuse and a mental health condition. And I can't stay in that shelter forever. And there's just simply nowhere for me to go. So I'm stuck in this place that really doesn't address my conditions. And I'm not getting the services that I need. It's not good for me, it's not good for my child. So this system is a flow, right? You enter into an emergency shelter system, you're assessed, you start to move in the right direction, but ultimately you need to find housing. Housing is the key. 2,700 units. You will hear it frequently. You can read about it in the paper. It is our 2,700 unit plan. And so today, where we stand is that we have taken these 2,700 units that we need, and perhaps more going forward. But, I need to put that out there. This is not sort of a one-time, all-be-all 2,700 unit plan, but it's a really good start in the right direction. So we take 2,700 units. Well, 2,700 units should not fall to the core of our county. It should not all fall onto Santa Ana, Anaheim, Tustin, Orange, Costa Mesa. It needs to be regionalized. And the reason that that's so important is because every 2 years, the federal government's HUD requires us to do a point-in-time count. And we did our point-in-time count in January of 2017. I woke up very early on a windy day and actually walked multiple blocks in Newport for 4 hours counting homeless. We did that across the entire county, and there are homeless in every single city of this county. Make no mistake about it, there are homeless in Villa Park, Rancho Santa Margarita, Huntington Beach, and everywhere. And so when you think about the 2,700 units and how we distributed those out, we felt as an association on behalf of our cities that those needed to be populated out per the population of each city for several reasons. First of all, 2,700 units in any one given community is way too many. No one can absorb that. Secondly, not one city should have to absorb that, right? We need to be able to approach this from a regional perspective. And so basically what we said is, okay, Aliso Viejo, if you're 3% of the 3.2 million people in the county of Orange, how about you take 3% of 2,700 units, which is roughly like 33 units, right? It's very minimal. It also makes it much easier from a community standpoint in terms of absorbing those units. I'm sure in this series you have heard about NIMBYism. It is rampant in this community, in this county overall. Many communities really kind of push back either on housing overall, but then when you sort of put a stigma attached to it, it gets even stronger, right? So we wanted to make those numbers absorbable for communities. And when I say 2,700 units, it's not all going to come online within 12 months. This takes time and effort and funding, and I'm going to touch on that very briefly. How do you finance and fund 2,700 units? That's difficult, and I'm gonna leave that for the business community to touch on. But from a public entity standpoint, we are aggressively looking at federal state funding that is coming through the pipeline, and I think if you're reading the newspaper and watching the news over the last 12 months, you will have seen that the state of California has finally started to provide opportunities for significant amounts of state funding to be made available to local communities to start to address not only the capital infrastructure cost of creating more of these units, but also the integrated services that we need to feed into these new housing units. And I will just say, I took a group of 50 elected officials to San Antonio, Texas in January of this year to see a model. It's called the Haven for Hope. I would encourage you all to take a look at it. It is a 22-acre campus in the city of San Antonio. They have reduced homelessness significantly through this project and program that continues to be ongoing and actually expanding. And what really my takeaway from all of that was we can provide as much housing as we need, but if we don't provide those integrated services into these homes and ensure that the residents and our very vulnerable have the services that they need to continue to both be stabilized and then thrive well into the future years, we will have failed. And ultimately, it will become a revolving door of individuals in and out of housing. So the services are just as important as the housing. And finally, the state of California has woken up to this opportunity to say, okay, let's pump our communities full of money. And that's really where we are today. We are coming up with a plan, and we are working very hard to access those dollars, bring them back to Orange County, regionalize our efforts, and get all of our cities engaged and our communities through our faith-based work, and we're so grateful for that. It truly can be a game changer in terms of getting people's hearts and minds around this issue. So with that, I'm going to pause and turn it over.
Let's say one of us wants to go to our city council and really urge them to get on board and make a difference. From your experience, what are our city council persons up against? What are the challenges they're facing? Help us get into their minds so we'll know how to address them better.
You know, our local elected officials, they need our support and they need our encouragement. I spoke to the NIMBY issue, and it's fierce. When the tent cities were proposed, the backlash from communities, I don't think the tent cities were the appropriate thing to do, just as a side note, but the backlash was fierce, right? And so we have to sort of embrace our elected officials and give them courage to say to our communities, this is what we need, and this is how we can solve our issues, and this is how we can, you know, close the loop on this revolving door that we will continue to find ourselves in. I just want to say, I have to throw out this number. We have 30,000 children in this county that don't have an address. 30,000 children in this county who do not have an address. And so when our elected officials are looking for solutions, I do have to remind them frequently that that's your next pipeline of homeless. Those children are our next generation. And so I think, you know, we've felt this NIMBY effect for years and years, over a decade here now in Orange County, and giving them encouragement, helping educate your fellow, you know, community members, talking about solutions rather than these anecdotal stories, and working from data is an important part of the story.
Well, then you've already bled into the next side of the question, which is the other side of the coin. If these are the challenges that they're up against, but what are the challenges that we need to bring to our city elected officials?
I think talking about what you see and feel in your own communities, you know, what through your congregations, through community meetings, talking about it. I think communicating and raising the awareness that there is active community members who want to see change and want to see results. If they don't hear that, then sort of, you know, they go with, well, no one cares and no one's showing up unless they're opposing it.
All right, well, thank you.